Well, it's so good to have you here today. You know, I was thinking it's now 22 years or so since Liz and I first moved to the Seacoast area. And we moved here in the month of July, so we moved here from Florida. So we got here in July and we thought, boy, this is pretty cool. Is this how it is up here? Just, you know, it's a good month to move to New England here. So I was just thinking, 22 years ago when we came, I was young and thin then, had long hair. And who would have guessed 22 years later I'd be standing up in front of a congregation like you preaching the Word of God. It's amazing how God just kind of develops us over time, isn't it? Yeah, I'm still young and thin. Okay. Yeah, I don't know what he's smoking, but let's pass it around. But when I was down in Florida, I had the opportunity to teach some religion classes at a local college and university, and I got to tell you, I had a great time doing that. I got to interact with bright young minds, eager to figure it all out, and people from all different cultures as we dialogued about God. And I found these discussions exciting, informative, illuminating, fascinating, even exhilarating. And one of the things I kind of experienced as I taught these classes, it kind of confirmed a suspicion I've always had, and that is that we humans, we're instinctively religious people. Whether we like it or not, we're always looking for something beyond ourselves, something bigger than us. And all these religious people running around trying to figure this out, it makes for a lot of different definitions of God, doesn't it? In the 2001 edition of the World Christian Encyclopedia, David Barrett and his fellow editors counted some 10,000 different religions in the world, and more than 33,800 different Christian denominations. Can you believe that? In a later Pew Research study, they found more than 8 out of 10 people in the world, some 5.8 billion people, all identified with some kind of religious group. And in another study, they estimated that that number is actually going to grow by 2050, the year 2050. Although, interestingly enough, here in America, they think the number of religious people will actually go down. It's interesting. But worldwide, go up. Interesting. All these different people, all on this religious quest. And so it's a lot of different people working with a lot of different definitions of God. And all of these definitions, they beg some larger questions, don't they? Are all these definitions somehow correct? Are they all just different paths leading to the same goal? Or are they really totally different definitions pointing us in totally different directions? In which case we have a bigger problem because we have to sort through the thousands of definitions to try to decide which one is the right definition, which one should we believe? And especially if we're Christians, how do we know that our definition of God, if we're in one of these 33,830 different denominations, how do we know our definition of God is the correct one? There are a lot of questions like that. Well, here at Bethany, in this summer, we have begun a new series. It's called The 10 Suggestions. You probably know them better as the 10 Commandments. But we're actually asking ourselves, do we really think of them as commands? Do we think of them commandments? Do they govern our lives? Do we really respond to them in obedience? Or have we let the world kind of seep into our own worldview that maybe we do view them as suggestions for our life? Last week we learned that these commandments, they're the pathway to God's blessing. He gives them out of His love. He wants us to see a way forward, and so that's why He gives the commandments. And Pastor Bruce led you through the first commandment that says, "You shall have no gods before me." This week, then, we turn to the second commandment, and I hope that as we reflect on that commandment together, we can address that very basic question that all we religious people have. Who is God really? And to do that, let me invite you to turn to the notes inside of your bulletin. Inside of that paper they handed you on the way in were some notes, a sermon outline with some blanks to fill in. If you did not get that, just put up your hand. One of the ushers will bring it around and make sure you can follow away. It's our way of trying to keep you awake, right? You have a little mat there. So And if you look at those notes on the first page, it kind of launches the series. We're going to begin in Deuteronomy chapter 5 and look at the commandment as the second commandment as it's recorded in Deuteronomy chapter 5, and it starts in verse 8. It goes like this: "You shall not make for yourselves an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or anything on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them." That's the fundamental basis of the command. See, God is preparing his people to enter into a land that's going to have many different definitions of God. And he's preparing them in advance when he says, when you go in there and you interact with these cultures with all these different definitions of God, don't give in to them. Don't adjust this definition of God that I'm about to give you. Definitions that will be different than the great I am that manifested and revealed himself to Moses. So he's getting his people ready. And we have to understand that the cultures of that day, when they went to define their gods, they did it by creating images of them, forms of them carved out of wood and stone. Images that would suggest to them in a visible form what the invisible God really looked like. And I was tempted from my world religion days to show you some pictures of what those images would have looked like, but I was afraid that some of you may not think it's all that appropriate to show all these idols here on a Sunday morning worship service. And so in the interest of proper decorum, you'll just have to take my word for it. When you look at them, they're really kind of strange objects to look at. They have exaggerated body parts in all the wrong places. A mixture of animal and human characteristics. And you look at these strange objects that have been dug up from the ancient world, and you say to yourself, how could anybody worship this thing? It's just alien to our culture. We can't figure it out. Some of you may be familiar with other cultures, and maybe it makes a little sense to you, but many of us, most of us, look at those images and say, this has nothing to do with me. I'm not tempted to do this. And so it's possible then you read through this commandment that says, don't bow down to any of these images that you've carved out of any things in heaven and earth and the water, and you say, I don't do that. I'm good on this commandment. Let me check that box. I can move on. We can go out to lunch here. We got this commandment down, right? And that's really a stumbling block for us because we can't identify with that command at all. What is idolatry in our age? And over the centuries, many Christians have struggled with that, tried to reinterpret this command in a way that maybe could help us identify and see where the problem lies. So, for example, in the 16th century, many of the Protestant reformers said, well, all the images that we find in the Roman Catholic Church, that's a violation of this command. And so we need to get rid of those images. And so that's why in many Protestant churches, you'll find a lot less images in their windows and in their sanctuary because of this commandment, that they feel like it's a violation. In fact, some of the more radical reformers actually broke into churches and started to destroy some of the images, unfortunately. Great pieces of art that were destroyed, all because of this commandment. That would be one way, I suppose, that you could interpret the command. More recently, there's kind of a different way folks go about it. If you read blogs or listen to sermons, they'll talk to you about kind of the materialism of our age, the way that we make idols out of power or money or sex or fame or celebrity and with perfect human form. And maybe we just creating idols, a different kind of idol. We're really worshiping materialism. And I suppose that's possible as well. But I want to argue this morning that there's something deeper here, something much more foundational. Whatever this command might say about religious art or materialism, I think it goes even deeper than that. I think it questions our fundamental human weakness, our fundamental inborn human pride that wants to define a God in our own image, wants to define a God that we want to. It addresses that feeble human nature that wants to make a God in our own image. And I think that particular tendency is a lot more frequent than you think. I think all of us are on the brink of idolatry more often than we think. It's not just for those ages in the past. I think we all have a tendency to try to redefine God. Let me illustrate what I mean. Let's suppose in your life, we need a new job, or we need a new relationship, or we need a new place to stay, or we need an infusion of cash, we need our body healed, we need something that we need desperately. And we pray to God, God, do this thing for me. But for whatever reason, God doesn't do it, or he doesn't do it in the way we want him to do it. What happens in our mind? We start to have doubts, and we start to say, wait a minute, this is not a God that I like. See, the God that I want should do whatever I ask him to do. The God that I want should give me whatever I want when I need it. That's the God that I want. And so maybe our definition of God is kind of off, because we want a God that's a little more responsive to what I need and I desire. Or how about this other scenario? You read here in Scripture and you come away with this idea, wait a minute, this God has way too much to say about how I live my life. He tells me who I'm allowed to sleep with and not allowed to sleep with. That's a little old-fashioned. Maybe we can have a God that's not so old-fashioned, that maybe he allows a little more flexibility with who I'm allowed to sleep with. Or maybe you find in the Scripture there's ways you're supposed to conduct your business about honesty and integrity, and you think, well, my God, that God, he really doesn't understand how to make money in this world, so I'm going to have to adjust my definition of God so that I can really live in this world and make money the way you have to in this dog-eat-dog kind of world. See, all those challenges in life, we look at this definition of God we get from the Scriptures, and we say, if we could alter that just a bit to accommodate our tastes, that would be great. Or let me ask another difficult question. Do you think God is more of a Republican or a Democrat? How's that for a troublemaking question, right? See, we have people on both sides of the spectrum here. We got people over on the right, people on the left. Do you think the God favors Fox News or CNN? Which do you think he... See, we get into this place where we think we know what God's thinking, that God is on our side. And we say that, and you know what's amazing to me? It doesn't matter where we stand. If we're over here on the right, we think God's standing with us. If we're over here on the left, we think God's standing with us. No matter where we stand, we think God's standing with us. It's amazing, isn't it, how often God agrees with us? But here's the problem. There's only one nation in the whole history of the world that could claim that God was on their side. Only one, the ancient people of Israel. He gave them a whole law book. He handpicked their kings. He told them exactly how they were supposed to live. There was only one nation that had that level of development that God predicted. And you know what happened as you follow that story? God would say to them, look, I'm on your side already. Here's the problem. You're not on my side. You're not doing what I need you to do. So anytime we get ourselves in this mindset where you think, well, God's on my side, he's on the side of my political party or my culture or my sports team, he's the God of the Red Sox, maybe not this year, right? But God's on my side, he's an American God. We have to be careful. That's some of what Hitler and the German Christians said. That's some of what the terrorist states are saying. God is on my side, the side of my political, cultural place. Whenever we get to that place where we think God is on our side, a little yellow light should go off. In fact, a big red flashing light, and it should say to us, no. The question is not whether God is on our side. The question is always whether we're on God's side. Are we on God's side? Are we doing what God wants us to do? Are we following his way? And so you see, this idolatry thing, we're in a lot more danger than we think. Even we good Christians, not just folks out there that are making up all kinds of definitions of God. You and I, man, we're in danger of redefining God all the time. We're in this culture that wants to change the definition of all of God over and over again. We would like a God more suited to our culture, to our lifestyle, to our own sinful desires. We're teetering on the brink of idolatry all the time. And the truth is, our mental images, we may not be creating images of wood and stone, but all those ideas we have of God, they're just as wrong, just as dangerous, just as sinful as those distorted images of God that we dig up from the ancient world. But nevertheless, we just can't help ourselves. We just keep repeating ourselves, trying to figure it out. In our head, we think we've got to sort out what God is and who he is, and we've come up with all kinds of different definitions. But here's the problem. If we keep doing that, if we keep going down this different pathways, we're going to put ourselves in danger. There's real danger in this sin. Let's look at the warning that comes with this command. Look again at verse 9. The text says, "You shall not bow down to them," that is, these idols, "or worship them." Why? "For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of their parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me." There's a warning embedded in this command. God interprets this whole chasing after other gods as defining other gods as hating him. Why? He's like the jealous spouse. That's the image uses here, whose spouse is off running after other lovers. That's how God sees it when we go chasing after these other definitions. We're hating him, and the jealous God is saying, no, I'm not giving up on these people. I'm not going to let them persist in their error, chasing all these bad gods. Why? Because their sin, it's going to have effect on their children from 2 and 3 generations. Now, I realize on the surface this verse sounds very, very harsh. How can God punish children for the sins of their parents? Doesn't seem right. And it isn't right. Just step back for a moment and think about your experiences. Think about our experiences. Haven't we known for some time that our bad choices of parents can affect our children? We've known for several decades now that alcoholism, drug addiction, physical, mental abuse, man, it permeates down into our kids. And they carry that as baggage into their next relationship. I see them in my office as we counsel together. Young couples going to get married, they bring that baggage with them, whatever came. And you know what your parents did, it affects who you are today. Sit in counseling sessions and the father was unfaithful and now the daughter can't trust her husband. The mother was unfaithful and now a son can't trust his wife. These bad moral choices that we make, man, they have an impact on our children. And our children take that baggage into their relationship and pass it down to their children. See, the truth is, God doesn't have to do much to judge us. Much of his judgment is just stepping back and letting people reap the effects and the results and the consequences of their own bad choices. See, I think that's what's going on here. That's what was going on in Israel. See, we know how this story turns out, don't we? God issues this warning through Moses. Don't chase after these other gods. But the people wouldn't listen. They got into the culture and they found that the gods there, well, if they prayed to them, they get more rain for their crops. The gods there, they let them have sex with whoever they wanted to have sex with. Their gods were much more lenient. Let's adopt their definition. And so for generation after generation, God would repeat the warning. Don't adopt the definitions of the God around you. God different than the great I am. He sent prophet after prophet to the people with a message, repeating Moses' warning. Stop chasing the other definitions of God. They won't work. So, for example, consider the words spoken by the prophet Amos. Amos says, because they have rejected the law of the Lord their God and not kept his decrees, because they have been led astray by false gods, gods their ancestors have worshipped, I will send fire on Judah that will consume the fortresses of Jerusalem. God is predicting a judgment. Some 700 years have probably passed from the time where Moses first issued this warning to his people. Don't chase after gods, and now other gods. Now, 700 years later, Amos has to repeat that same warning again and one more time. See, for 7 centuries, think about it, for 700 years, God has waited, patiently waited for generation after generation to come back to him. And time after time, he let the people experience the pain of their own bad choices, watch the effect of those bad choices on their children, hoping against hope that maybe somebody along the line would wake up and say, we've got to get back to the God who revealed himself, instead of chasing after these other gods. But ultimately, they would not. For a brief period of time, and then it was just too tempting to adjust their definitions of God, and God waits. After Amos, he waits another 200 years. Now we're some 9 centuries removed from the time that Moses issues that command, and at last God has had enough. And again, he doesn't have to do much. He steps back. He doesn't protect them from their own bad choices, and now the mob, the marauding forces from Babylon come pouring in to Jerusalem. They raze the holy temple to the ground. They burn up the city of Jerusalem. They take the best and the brightest and carry them back into captivity into Babylon. 900 years later, they find themselves in captivity again. Moses had delivered them from captivity in Egypt, and now they were in captivity again. And the only reason they were there is because time after time after time, they decided to redefine God in their own image. A God that they liked better, a God that gave them more what they wanted. They would not listen to the God who defines himself. So there they found themselves in captivity again. And who would deliver them this time? Who would come in and rescue them from the mess that they've created for themselves? Why don't they call on one of the gods they invented? Why don't they invent one of these other gods that they imagined existed? Call on them. Read the prophets. The prophets are saying to them all the time, just call on one of those gods. Go ahead, you created them, you think they're God. Let them rescue. Here's the problem. Those gods can't rescue them because those gods don't exist. Those gods are just figments of people's imagination. The only God that could really rescue them from captivity is the God who is, the great I am, the one who revealed himself to Moses, the great I am. And see, I think you and I in our modern world, we need to hear that warning again. Because look around us. Generation after generation, we've watched children make bad decisions, and then their children make bad decisions. We've made bad decisions. We've created a mess, all because we don't want to return to the very God that created us and gave us these commands and said, walk in this way. Do this. But we didn't listen. We prefer to kind of make it up as we go along. And this is the mess we've created for ourselves. See, here's the bottom line about all this. We don't have the right to define God. We really don't. All these efforts defining God, so much waste of time. Why? Because God's already defined himself. He's already revealed himself. Our minds, we couldn't comprehend God even if we wanted to. How are we supposed to define a God we haven't seen or known? We couldn't even begin to understand that God. The only way we're going to know God is if God comes out and reveals himself. And he has for thousands and thousands of years. This story has been revealed over centuries to generation after generation. That perfect story of God culminating in the coming of his own Son in the flesh of Jesus Christ, revealing who God is. See, God has declared himself. Why are we running around trying to redefine him? This is who God is. He just simply asks, do you believe it or you don't? See, instead of trying to find God, we've got to realize God defines himself. And guess what else? He gets to define us. We don't get to define God. He gets to define us. He gets to tell us who we are and what we should be doing and how we should be living. That's his prerogative as God. And that's what we need, because if we don't follow his ways, we're going to mess ourselves up. And that's really what we found. That's what we're living with right now. Is generation after generation refusing to accept the God who is and start chasing up gods that they make up on their own. So what hope do we have? What hope do we have? How can we possibly fix this mess we've created? And not just us, the generations before us. Well, we have only one choice, and that's to rely on the promise of God. We've got to go back to him, and we've got to rely on a God who never gives up. Look again at this text. Again, we look at verse 9, only this time we'll read the promise as well as the warning. He says, you shall not bow down again to the idols or worship them. Why? For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children, the sin of their parents, to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me. But here's the promise, verse 10. But showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. See, this is the real story of a jealous God, a God who will not give up when his spouse goes after others. He's a jealous God that will not give up. And yes, he will allow us to experience the pain of our bad choices for 2, 3 generations, 3, 4 generations. But here's the thing, his promise, it goes for thousands of generations. God's promise never, 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 never gives up. Every new generation has the opportunity to turn it around, to reject the errors of the past. We see it here all the time. Families that are breaking the cycle of sin, breaking the cycle of brokenness, experiencing the healing of God, Celebrate Recovery or Stephen Ministry or Changes That Heal, all these courses we give, all these ministries, they're finding God. They're saying enough already. We're breaking the cycle. They're responding to the promise of God. He has not given up. His love will keep chasing and relentlessly pursue us until he wins us back. That's the kind of love. That's the kind of promise we have. God has not abandoned us to this mess we've created. He continues to pursue us. Now, in this text, there are 2 words translated love. Love appears twice here. You can see it underlined. But in the original Hebrew language, there's actually 2 different words there. One type of love that describes God's love for us, and one that describes our love for God. The love that describes God's love for us, that's a very strong word. That word talks about an unrelented, unconditional force of love that devotes himself entirely and completely to his people. It never, never, never gives up on his people. He never gives up on the generations. He's constantly coming back with his promise. It's the kind of love that a jealous God will have for his people. He's not going to let them go. He's going to pursue them despite their error. And then there's the other kind of love, the love that he calls for us, the love that he asks his people to have for him. That's not a perfect love. It doesn't demand perfection. That's not what that's talking about. It's a love that is simply responding to a parent, to a father, of loyalty and devotion owed to that parent. He's just saying, look, accept the fact that I'm there for you. Accept the fact that these pathways, they're for your benefit. Respond to him in love. Not just in word only, but in deed. Seek to follow him. It's the kind of love we owe our Heavenly Father. Why would we not respond to him in that way or want to respond? Because he loves us. It's kind of like your house, right? You have rules in your house. The children have to obey those rules. Do they always get the fact that those are for their own good? They have to go to bed on time and they can't have too much ice cream, right? They look at us like we're some sort of ogre. You know, that we're the problem. Like we just want to take all the fun out of life. The truth is we have these rules because we care for those children. God is just asking for that kind of love from us. Saying, look, I have rules in my household. As my sons and daughters, you need to follow these rules because you need to understand these rules are for your own good. They are there to protect you from all the trouble that comes if you don't follow the rules. That's all God's asking. Can you just understand I'm a loving father? You give me the love and the respect that I deserve as your father. Said to those people, he returns, he blesses, he protects, he strengthens. So here's the choice then, you and I are left with. We can continue to keep looking for another God. We can continue to try to define God in any way we feel like, as long as it accommodates our new modern lifestyle. We can just accept the God who's already revealed himself. Accept the God who already says, here I am. And understand that he now turns around and he defines us and he says, here's who you really are. You're my son and daughter that I've made in my image. He's called to restore us and remake us in the image of his son. That's our destiny. That's who we are. Can we just respond in love? Why wouldn't we want to do that? And have him heal us and fix us from the inside out. So here's the thing. We don't really have to worry about all those thousands of definitions of God out there. Really, it doesn't bother me in the slightest. I enjoy talking to those folks. Yes, they're wrong, but that's okay. We'll have those discussions. But they're not wrong because I say so. They're wrong because God's already revealed himself. We can't define God anyway. God's already defined himself. The only question is, will we let him define us? Will we let him tell us who we should be and what we ought to be? And we follow in his way. Let me say one other thing about all those people out there and all their definitions of God. How do you think they're going to figure out who God really is? By us arguing with them, fighting with them? That's not God's way. You know how God is going to convince the world out there? You know why he called this people? He tells them, Deuteronomy chapter 4, go read that chapter. He said, look, here's the thing. If you live the way I want you to, I will pour blessing into your land, and you look around and the nations will come to you and say, wow, what a God you have. See, if we respond and if we are the people of God that he wants us to be, people will come pouring in and say, who's your God? Because that's what I want. So rather than us kind of try to be like them and modify our lives to suit their taste, no. Let's follow the God who is and let them see what God will do through a people that have had enough with compromise and say, no, we're going to live according to what God's ways are. We're going to respond to him in love. And then let us change this whole culture for Christ, because they will see a people live and in color living God's way through his Spirit and his power. That's our mission as a church. Right? So let me just invite you to examine right now, where in my life am I seeking to redefine God? And just stop and back up and say, God, I don't want to try to define you anymore. I want you to start defining me. Tell me where I need to change. Bow before you, the great I am. Let's pray. Father God, we come to you humbly knowing that we don't have all the answers. We don't have many answers, but you've provided us an answer. You've revealed yourself. You've told us who you are. And you've told us who we are. And Father, our desire is just to follow that way. We don't want to be changed by the culture around us into something you never intended us to be. We want to acknowledge your way and your path and do it your way. out of love and response to you, and also so that our children will be saved the torment, and also so the world around us can understand that you are a God who wants to bless his people. We ask this in the name of Christ Jesus our Lord.